Well, we are starting our final intellectual property major issue, and that is trademarks. And there's a reason I keep trademarks to the last one that I do. It's because trademarks are very different than patents and copyrights and trade secrets. Whereas those three are things that you get to own, and they protect you as the business or the inventor. It protects creators of these things, right? You own the copyright, you own the patent, you create the thing that is the trade secret, it's yours. So it protects the creator. The trademark is different because it protects consumers, not the brands that own the trademark. It protects consumers, that they know what they're getting. We want, as a matter of public policy, for you as a consumer to be able to trust the things that you buy, and that they are what they say they are. And we're going to take a look at some examples. You can see what I mean as we get a little bit further here. So I'm going to show you a few trademarks, and normally if I was doing this live in class, we would be doing this collectively as a group. So I'm going to ask some questions, which you obviously can't answer, but you'll get the gist anyway. So here are a few famous trademarks. So the first one, perhaps the most well-known trademark in the world, or at least at one time, it was one of the most identifiable marks, the Nike swoosh, right? You know when you see that it is Nike. The thing does not even need to say Nike. The shoe doesn't need to say Nike on it. You know what that is, right? You all recognize this. It's the Apple logo. Okay, so Nike swoosh, Apple logo. These are symbols that identify a brand. How about this? I think most people, every time I've done this in class, most people immediately say Volkswagen Beetle, and it is. And so Volkswagen has a trademark, or when we talk about shapes and things, it's called trade dress, but it is a trademark. They have trade dress trademark over their shape of their vehicle. So if Chevy or Ford wanted to go after the same market as Volkswagen and try to create something that looks similar, right? That iconic look, they would have a tough time doing it, and because it is distinctive enough, and they've pursued that. Think about what Chrysler's done with some of their cars that have sort of taken on the Rolls-Royce and Bentley look, and people put aftermarket components on them, and it has fooled me before, where I've seen them and thought, well, that's you look from a little bit of a distance and you think it's a high-end Bentley or Rolls-Royce or something, and it's actually a Chrysler. So you get the idea, right? But the problem there is that for Rolls-Royce and Bentley, the shape wasn't as distinct as what it is for the Volkswagen Beetle. Okay, so you get the idea that it's not just a symbol, but it can be very distinctive shapes of things too, can be considered trademarks. Do you know what this is? Most people, even if you're not a farmer, you say it's a John Deere tractor. How do you know? Well, because it's green. And is it actually John Deere? Well, I don't know. Is it one of their models? Who knows? But you see a green tractor, that color green at least, and you think that's John Deere. Now, if another tractor company came out with a green tractor in the same look, John Deere has a good case to stop that, because you can see, you're driving by a field, you can look out and you can say that's a John Deere tractor. And if you saw a case tractor that was green, you wouldn't believe it. You would think it's a John Deere. So colors related to things can actually be trademarked. Green for a tractor is significant. Sounds can be trademarked. Now here I usually play two famous sounds. you'll recognize the first one as the MGM Lion Roar, and the second one as the NBC Chimes. And most people hear those, and you know what it is, or know that you know it at least. And so they are very famous marks. Another famous sound case is that Harley-Davidson tried to trademark the sound of their engine, and it was, they brought in all sorts of audiologists and people who could help try to determine what was distinct about the Harley-Davidson sound, because other motorcycle companies were trying to copy their motor sound, and they couldn't find enough distinctiveness in it to award a trademark. But anyway, the idea is that sounds are another category of thing that we can consider for trademark protection. So you might recognize this shirt if you're a sports fan. If you watch college sports, that's Texas orange, Texas burnt orange, and they are they have a Pantone hue that they use, and other sports teams can't use it because it's such a distinct look. All right, now here's where I like to start. We've looked at some ways that trademark, some tools people use to trademark, things that they trademark, colors, sounds, symbols, names of things, right? Now, this is where I start to explain how it's not something you own as a brand, but it's something that is to protect consumers. And so I ask you, what is this? And most people say it's a bottle of water. And I always ask, how do you know? How do you know what it is? How do you know it's not poison? And so I'll tell a story. One time I was in Bangladesh, and I remember when I first got there, we were drinking bottled water because you don't want to drink water out of the tap. And the bottle of water had in fairly big lettering on the back, arsenic free. And I remember commenting to someone I was with, I said, that's strange. Why would that matter? Why would you put that on here that it's arsenic free? Who thinks about arsenic? You hear arsenic as this poison that you don't hear too much about, but why would you even think to put it's arsenic free on the label? Well, we learned that a lot of the water table in Bangladesh is tainted with arsenic, and so they when they pull water out, it can have arsenic in it, and it can cause you to be poisoned. And so the bottled water companies are very concerned to make sure you know that their water was pulled from an arsenic-free well. And so from that point on, when you learn that, you worry about what kind of bottled water you buy, and you don't need to go and check every label to make sure it says arsenic-free, because you know that if you buy a certain brand, that you are assured that it's arsenic-free. So when you go to the market, you would always pick the bottles of water, the brands that you trust. So it's protecting consumers, because you want to know that when you open up that bottle of water, that it doesn't have poison in it, that it's arsenic free. Now, we don't have that problem in the U.S., but you could imagine other situations where how do you actually know what you're getting into? What is this? Yeah, it's a blue bottle. You don't know, right? Maybe it's blue Gatorade. Maybe it's Windex. Maybe it's antifreeze. Have you ever opened a bottle of Gatorade and had a friend test it or smelled it first? I always just take a drink. What if that was antifreeze in there? Have you ever had a blue Gatorade and thought for a second, man, I feel like I'm drinking windshield wiper fluid? Kind of looks like that, right? And apparently there's a thing that people go around drinking. They empty Windex bottles and then fill it with Gatorade, and we're walking around drinking it to try to get people to give them strange looks. But you know, we take it for granted in the U.S., but you don't know what you're really drinking. I mean, you don't know that that blue Gatorade is actually blue Gatorade, uh, and that you're not going to take a swig of poison. Um, and so that's a, you know, this is why we're protecting consumers, because we want you to know that you can trust that thing, that you don't have to, every time you open up a blue Gatorade or a bottle of water or a can of soda, you don't have to go and have it poison tested to make sure it's not going to harm you. Um, and so trademark is giving you as the consumer assurance about what that thing is. And so those trademarks continuously need to point to the the safety and efficacy of what they stand for. Um, a couple other examples, you know, how do you know if you go and buy $150 pair of Jordans, you want real Jordans made by Nike, right? You don't want something that was made in Cambodia but that are knockoffs. You want the real, you want to pay for Nike quality. And you know, here are two examples. How do you know? Well, you don't. You have to trust, you want to trust the logo. And this is something, this is why we take and police trademarks, is that we want to, it's not to protect Nike, it's to protect you and your investment, so to speak. By the way, we've in certain classes, we've analyzed this several times. We believe that um, the shoe on the left is the real one, but it's pretty hard to tell. The stitching looks a little better. You can analyze it for yourself. Trademarks are any word, name, symbol, device used to identify products and distinguish them from the competition. Words, names, symbols, devices, so those colors, slogans, shapes, designs, logos, sounds, right? There is talk right now about trademarking smells, that you want distinct smells, and so that's kind of a new frontier for trademark. And how do you how do you how do you clearly make a smell distinct and that you can objectively assess that? I don't know, but it's one of the places where trademark law is going. So distinctiveness is really the key to this. Now I kept talking about things being distinct. They have to be distinct in order to, the green, the tractor is distinctive. It's so well associated with John Deere. The shape of the Volkswagen Beetle is distinct because it's so well associated with that car. So distinctiveness is a scale. And we've got the scale that essentially is from generic and the lowest up to arbitrary and fanciful. And I'll show you this in another format that I think makes it a little bit more, a little easier to digest. And so that's this chart here where it becomes more and more distinct as it goes toward the right on this chart. So a term like food mart is generic. It is not going to be granted trademark protection because it's a food mart. What is it? It's completely descriptive of what that thing is. It is it's a market, a mart where you buy food. Okay, generic. Twist tie is an example. So that's become the way that that product is described. We cannot go out and get a trademark on the term twist tie. Unfortunately, we wish we could. Probably if somebody would have done it at the very beginning of the industry and been the first one, you might have been able to create it and say that it's somewhat suggestive on this scale, but it's become generic over time. And now we'll talk again about things, about the genericness of things and how things can move up and down the scale in a sense. Then we have purely descriptive marks. That's like a quick print. Well, it's a quick place to get things printed. Computerland. It is a place for buying computers. Okay? it is descriptive of what it is. It is much harder to get a trademark for descriptive things. You will apply, and the trademark office will probably not grant it, and they will want you to show that it has created what we call secondary meaning. It means more than it's just being descriptive. So for instance, we have a trademark on the term Elastigag, right? That's our brand. If we would have called it Elastic Tag, 2 words, and tried to get that, that would have been completely descriptive, okay? Perhaps even generic. By changing it to Elasti, which is not a complete word, and combining it into one word with tag, we've moved into something that is suggestive. Okay, so it got us over the burden of being descriptive. Now, this is sort of the place between descriptive and suggestive where the trademark office starts to grant trademarks. That descriptive and generic, it's really hard to get, if not impossible. Suggestive, arbitrary, and fanciful, you tend to be able to make good arguments to have those trademarks protected because they will start to mean something to consumers. So some examples of a suggestive trademark: stronghold nails. Okay, stronghold isn't completely descriptive. I don't really think of nails as it's sort of holding things, but at least it's not a it suggests something about the product, right? Roach motel for insect traps. It suggests that the cockroaches are going to come in and stay there. PlayStation, it is, it's not descriptive, because it's a video game console. So PlayStation is at least suggesting that it's a place where you play games. Also, I think making it one word helps make that a little bit stronger. So it's suggestive of what it is, but not completely descriptive, and these are all things that are granted trademarks. Then we get arbitrary marks. These are words that are real words, but they don't relate to the thing that you're describing. So shell gas. A shell is obviously something, gas is obviously something, but the two things don't make sense together. Apple computers doesn't make sense together. And so they're arbitrarily associated, and the consumer, as you can imagine, has to make some kind of leap, right? Apple, you think about it, like Apple is such a strong brand. If they've created something bigger than the term, right? There's some kind of mojo, some magic behind the name Apple. Like, I don't think you would be able to talk me into being passionate about the word carrot, right? But it's a vegetable, an apple. I mean, why are we so passionate about Apple? They created something that means something more than what the word is. Carrot doesn't mean anything to me, but if Steve Jobs would have named that company Carrot, you'd be just as passionate about carrot as you are about Apple, right? So it's granted something. It's got a lot of trademark value to it because consumers have had to there's a lot of meaning. The consumer can't just make a quick leap to understanding what it is. They really have to have a deeper understanding of the product, and the company has had to create that meaning for them. And then finally, we have completely fanciful terms. So these are words that are just made up, and they get the strongest trademark ability because they're not real words. And so you, as the brand or company, have had to create an even greater amount of consumer comprehension of that concept because it's a word that you just created. So Exxon, for instance, is a fanciful term. Kodak. The founder of Kodak picked the name because he liked the strong K's. He wanted it to be a strong sounding term, and so it had two strong K's it ended with and a strong D, and he just made it up. Xerox, again, a made-up word. Buick has no other meaning. Bedford is a family name. It really is. It's certainly not an arbitrary. I think it fits more into the fanciful because it doesn't mean anything, right? Well, although we didn't make it up, it's got no other association, but it's a great name because it's got a strong B, strong D, and a couple of strong D's in it, and so it's very much in line with the fanciful genre here. And it was easy, and I actually went back this last year and shored up some of our Bedford marks related to different categories of business that we're in, and it was very easy to get those marks secured because it's a fanciful term. Now, let's talk about generic again. Brands, if they do not protect the name, can become generic. What is this? A lot of people immediately say a Band-Aid. Okay. What is this? You immediately think Kleenex. Well, the first was actually a bandage, and the second was a tissue. They could be the brand names, but we don't know. They were nondescript. And so Kleenex is a trademark that has been at risk of becoming generic, and they have tried very hard to make sure that they do not lose that association, that Kleenex has not become what the industry just calls it, because in the trademark office, what I would say that this is no longer protecting consumers, right? It's just helping, it is solely helping this company, and we're going to cancel the trademark. And so that's the risk. So what Kleenex and Band-Aid have done is that they've pushed hard to make sure that Kleenex is known as a brand tissue, and that Band-Aid is a brand adhesive bandage. Right? So they're working very hard at that and trying not to have their term become generic. Google is another one that's at risk for becoming generic, because we say any kind of internet search is, let's Google it. And so you'll see things where it says Google, and they'll call it Google search, and trying to make sure that you call Google as a brand of internet search and not the generic term for searching things. So a couple things that we're going to mechanics of trademark here, and one of the most important things to know about is notice. You have to give notice, much like we talked about in patents, and you will see these terms, these letters, TM and R, and I'd say most people don't know what they are or when you can use them, and it's very interesting. TM is something you can use at any point. If you have a brand, if you have a product name, something that you want to try to start creating and suggesting is it should be a protectable name. You want to distinguish it to consumers as an important signia. You can just use the TM. You don't need to register for anything. You don't need to apply. You just start using it. And so, for instance, when we start creating a new product line, I will immediately put TM behind the product name and or features that we're maybe trying to create brands out of. And so you can use this fairly liberally. It is a notice to consumers that this is something significant, that you are trying to protect them, and that they know that they're getting something from a single source. Okay, it's an indication of source. Now, then you go and you apply, you try to register this trademark with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. There's a very long, somewhat long process. It's much faster than the patent process. It usually takes, well, it depends on how backlogged they are, but it can be a couple months, can be as much as a year to a year and a half. And when you get that and you've gotten through and you've argued a bit with the patent and trademark examiners, you get federal trademark registration, and you get to use the circle R. So you can begin using the TM right away. You can use the R at a later date, but you always need to be using the mark on your brand to distinguish it as a brand, and that you are the indication of source. Trademark is a use it or lose it industry here. So you must use a trademark. If you're not using it, you're not, and by use we mean selling it. If you're not actively selling it into the market, then the trademark office will withdraw your mark. You need to show use every 6 years and refile with the Patent and Trademark Office every 10 years. You show use by showing shipping labels. So I'm always having very, very often, usually every other month or so, we're working on some trademark thing, we're having to show, prove that we're using a mark in the stream of commerce. And so we will file a photo of a shipping label with that mark on it. And this is actually kind of complicated because we have to work with our shipping and our computer programming departments to make sure all of these logos and names go out on all of the products, and I mean all of them, go out on all of them with those marks on them. If they are if you are not using it and another company realizes this and says, hey, they're not selling that product anymore, they can actually file to have your trademark canceled and force you to show use. And so I actually almost got to this point with a mark that we wanted to use last year, and it ended up that the company did not file on their own, but I was about to the point of challenging and having them prove that they were still using it, and I knew that they were not and could not because they had sold that division, but were still using the mark. Anyway, so you've got to actually be using it in the stream of commerce, or you'll lose it. When we get into lawsuits over trademark, it's often over trademark infringement, right? There's another brand that is using, or company that is using the same mark, and this is infringing on your company. The legal action for this is likelihood of confusion, and so we're confusing the consumer as to source, relationship, or affiliation. Likelihood of confusion is, again, the important, the operative term here. How likely are you as a consumer to be confused as to the source, relationship, or affiliation? Now, this is hard to describe, and it's seeing things and making a judgment call. There's no bright line rule here on what's confusing and what's not. And so, again, I'll give you a few examples. Are pinkberry and coolberry, is there a likelihood of confusion between these two items, these two logos? My reaction, I suspect yours, is these are very similar. The font, it's the there's kind of a pink and green. The font is almost identical. The logo is very nearly identical, and they're both selling frozen yogurt. If I saw coolberry, I would think, maybe this is. I might not even notice that it says coolberry, and I might walk in thinking it's pinkberry, or I might think this is somehow related to pinkberry. So yes, this is definitely a likelihood of confusion. It is consumers could get confused, and thus pinkberry could go and shut down this infringing mark by this company called Coolberry. How about this Toffee Crisp versus Reese's peanut butter cups? It's certainly similar in terms of orange and yellow and brown color scheme, but they're selling a little bit different product. I don't know. I think my argument in favor, I would probably say my gut is that this is very similar, but I'm probably not going to pick up the toffee crisp thinking I'm getting the Reese's. The font's not similar enough, and just how many color combinations of you of can there be for candy? I mean, there are only so many colors, variations of yellow and orange. Um, the things are going to work together. There are a lot of candy bars out there. So this is borderline. I think you make a good argument either way. I would probably go on the side of this is not likely going to confuse a consumer. But, um, there is that, I think there's like a Reese's, um, like a thinner bar. So maybe we'd look at some other Reese's products and see if there's something too similar. But again, this is one that, we could go a little bit either way, and perhaps you can make a good argument for why someone might grab the toffee crisp and get out to the car and go, oh no, I thought I got a Reese's because I grabbed the orange and yellow one, and here I've got this toffee crisp. I don't want that. How about McCurry versus McDonald's? Now, I've seen these McCurry type things in Bangladesh and India and other places. If you look at the text and the font, they're very similar. They're clearly trying to to um, you go off of the McDonald's theme here. I remember when I landed in Bangladesh and saw this for the first time, I thought, does McDonald's have some kind of affiliation, or are they did they create a a Bengali Indian subsidiary to serve that market, because beef is not a big thing there, and they're really into fried chicken, and they're really into curry. And so I was confused. So I'm going to fall on the side of there's a likelihood of confusion here, at least of association. Remember, it doesn't have to be actual confusion. It can be a relationship or association. To me, this is confusing as to that relationship or association, but you could argue it a different way. So a few examples of likelihood of confusion. On any of those cases, you could make a good argument opposite of what I said and be completely right. There's no bright line rule here. It's a judgment call. In addition to trademark infringement, we have another theory of that brands and companies can use, and that's trademark dilution, and that's blurring or tarnishing of a famous mark. So you are essentially hurting the brand, right? And here, if you look at this first one, Reese's Nursery, they are using exactly the same Reese's font and some colors. And so, I don't think that I didn't look at this and see any association to think, oh, hey, this is probably Reese's Peanut Butter Cups that's doing this. I'm just thinking there's someone named Reese who's trying to be clever and play off of their font and colors. And so now I know that probably doesn't hurt Reese's, but the fact that they're taking advantage of the theme and the colors and the font and everything that Reese's is building is diluting the power of the Reese's mark even slightly. And so we can go and end it, because it's dilution, and it's eventually it comes back to hurting consumers, because the brand means less and less. The more that other companies can borrow and steal the Reese's identity, eventually it's going to be more confusing for you as the consumer. And so then on the right, here's another one, this Enjoy Cocaine. This is tarnishing to Coca-Cola, right? I mean, it seems to make the inference that Coca-Cola is like a drug, or is addictive, or bad for you. In either case, it's not good for the Coca-Cola brand. And to hurt that brand will eventually come back to hurting consumers. And so this is tarnishing that mark, and Coca-Cola can put a stop to it. couple examples of some things that um, I saw. I was at a trade show a couple years ago, and there were these young ladies walking around with these backpacks full of Red Bull. And so I had a friend who was with me who really likes caffeinated beverages and loves Red Bull. So we saw these people walking around. I actually thought that's pretty cool. Like Red Bulls got these like mobile backpacks, and they're going around filling people up. That's awesome. Well, we my friend ran over there to get a glass of Red Bull. And when you got close to it, you realize that does not say Red Bull. It says, this by the way, is at the Produce Marketing Association trade show, so it's all about produce. It says Red Bell, and it's a Red Bell pepper drink, which sounds disgusting. So Red Bell pepper juice. And if you look closely at the logo, it's instead of two bulls bashing into each other, the two bell peppers bashing into each other. This is clearly infringing. Because I was confused. I was actually confused. My friend was actually confused. They borrowed not only the name, the logo, the color scheme, and so if I were Red Bull, I would have slapped a lawsuit or a cease and desist on them right away. How about International House of Prayer and IHOP? This was actually a big lawsuit that IHOP, International House of Pancakes, had this name, and that International House of Prayer, which is a church, seemed to, kind of play off the International House of Pancakes name by changing one word to prayer. Is there confusion here? I don't know. I think it's. I don't know I don't think there's actual confusion because you wouldn't go to International House of Prayer thinking you're going to get pancakes, or go to IHOP thinking you're going to be going to a church service. But there is an argument for dilution, that International House of P something is strong enough that there's no reason to have to use that phrase other than to try to borrow some of the goodwill from the International House of Pancakes, IHOP. Again, I don't have a good answer here, but that's a real situation. How about these? Again, more candy bars, but Reese's, and then we've got Reefers, which is marijuana infused peanut butter cups. Reefers peanut butter cup and Reese's peanut butter cup. Probably tarnishment here. The font's a little bit similar. They're certainly playing off the Reese's theme, right? I think there's tarnishment. Mr. Dank Bar and Mr. Good Bar, again, another medically marijuana infused candy bar here. I think that this one's an actual confusion, whereas the Reese's and Reefers don't look like each other. You wouldn't pick one up accidentally. The Mr. Dank Bar, Mr. Good Bar, you could pick up accidentally. Although I think the place you're probably in, you're not going to actually get these two things confused because you're going to be buying them at a marijuana store in Colorado, most likely. But in both cases, there would be a good tarnishment argument. Okay, you've got the Louis Vuitton versus Hot Diggity Dog case, and you should have read this if you haven't already. I want you to give it a read. This case is all about whether this company that created various dog chew toys based upon famous brands with Stephanie and Company, Chewy Vuitton, Chunel number 5. They were these clever names, and they sold them at your typical PetSmart type store. Whether there is trademark confusion or trademark dilution here. Now, this is one where I differ a little bit from the case. I actually would have believed that Louis Vuitton might have created a clever line of, in these cases, might have created a clever line of dog chew toys. Now, the judge in this case said, well, you're not going to look at this and think it's parody, right? You're not going to look at this and think that the high-end Louis Vuitton named it Chewy Vuitton and is selling it in PetSmart, right? They're going to make it out of real leather, and then they're going to sell it for a high price in their high-end boutique stores. So there's no sense of actual confusion. I think there's probably a good. I don't know. I'm not a pet guy. I mean, I've got a dog, but I don't go buy him toys like this. I would have actually been confused, perhaps, or at least it would have given me pause. There's probably a good argument for dilution, but give this case a read and see what you think. You don't have to agree with the case editor, maybe you do, but it's an interesting example, and I believe you can still find these things in some stores. That wraps up trademark for us. Again, the most important things to know are that we have the trademarks protecting consumers, that it is although brands apply for and possess essentially the trademark, they can lose them. It's because it's a consumer protection or anything, and you've got to enforce your brands for the benefit of consumers. Otherwise, you'll lose them. Okay, and we have trademark infringement as our cause of action when another company uses our trademark, and the likelihood of confusion test, if you will. Is there a likelihood of confusion is the operative test in that situation. If there's trademark confusion, then we can put an end to the infringing mark. We also have dilution when there's not actual confusion, but you're harming or tarnishing the brand. So that's the important things to know about trademark. It is one that I tend to ask more questions on for the multiple choice and have less on the written part of the essay because it's so we don't really have good elements here, right? We don't really have these it's so esoteric in a way. Unlike copyright and patent, where we have elements and we have sort of things you have to fulfill in order to get them. Trademark is just becoming distinct and becoming more arbitrary or more fanciful, and that's a really hard thing to balance and to make a judgment call on. So you'll probably see this stuff on the multiple choice, less on the essay, and but it's all very relevant to brands. It's something you will probably, if you work for a company or a brand, for a brand manager for Target or a major company like Medtronic, you're going to be worried about your internal brands and the companies that you represent. And so trademark is incredibly important, incredibly useful, and this is just a quick overview of that topic, but it's something that I think you will bump into very frequently.